Imagine you are standing at the edge of a window that looks out not over a city, not over a sea, but into a darkness so complete it seems almost deliberate. Somewhere behind you, Earth turns in its familiar sleep, full of weather, language, hunger, and history. Ahead of you is the place every human dream has pointed toward, and every human body has been quietly refusing for its entire evolution. If you stay with me through this descent, if you let your mind cross the threshold and keep going after comfort has already failed, then by the end, you may understand why the cosmos has always felt less like a promise and more like an immense question that does not care whether we answer it. And if this kind of journey pulls at something inside you, stay with Beyond the Universe, because what begins as wonder here will end somewhere much stranger. If this silence has found you too, subscribe to Beyond the Universe and follow the next descent into the dark. At first, space appears clean. That is the lie. It looks like an empty corridor between stars, a black hallway threaded with distant lights, a silent backdrop for the drama of planets and life. From a distance, the galaxy seems orderly enough, a luminous pattern stitched into darkness. But the first deception of the universe is that it lets itself be seen only in fragments. You are shown the glittering parts because they are easy to admire from a safe distance. What you are not shown, until you move toward it, is how little is actually there. Imagine you are inside a ship with a hull no thicker than a thought compared to the void surrounding it. The glass before you does not show emptiness, it shows consequences. Every light year outside is not space in the casual sense, not a room to cross or a field to walk through, but an interval so severe that motion becomes a kind of philosophical insult. You begin with the idea that travel means distance plus time, then space answers by turning time into the substance of the journey. You do not travel through space the way a bird crosses a sky. You are delivered into it, and then it slowly proves that it was never made for you. There is, of course, the old intoxication of proximity. A star looks close enough to name. A neighboring system can sound reachable when spoken by a human voice with confidence. We point to the nearest luminous points and imagine paths between them, as though the universe were arranged for navigation. But that is how scale deceives the mind, by letting the eye pretend that visibility is access. Alpha Centauri is nearby in the language of astronomy, and that phrase has ruined more intuitions than it has ever helped. Nearby is not near. Nearby, in cosmic terms, can still mean so many years that entire civilizations would need to be redesigned from the molecule upward just to survive the waiting. And this is where fascination begins to warp, because once you admit the distance is real, the dream does not simply become harder, it becomes haunted. The ship leaves the comfortable myth of the solar system and enters a region where every correction burns fuel, every degree of velocity feels borrowed from an impossible future, and every improvement in propulsion reveals a larger prison hidden behind it. Faster engines do not erase distance. They merely make the destination less absurd, but the universe does not care how much less absurd we become. Let's stay here for a moment, where the dream still feels clean enough to touch. Imagine the first generation of interstellar craft, fusion drives, antimatter concepts, laser sails stretched to impossible tension, maybe ships that use gravity itself as a ladder. Human beings love to solve the wrong problem brilliantly. We learn how to shave mass, bend light, and steal energy from reactions that would have looked supernatural to earlier centuries. Hope gathers in the workshop. It always does. And then the distance remains exactly what it was. The ship may accelerate. The stars do not move closer. You only discover that the math was never the true obstacle. Survival was. But it gets worse, because the ship is not simply traveling through emptiness. It is traveling through an environment that actively resists being crossed without consequence. Interstellar space is not an open road. It is a field of scattered particles, dust, radiation, magnetic uncertainty, and invisible hazards that become catastrophic at the velocities required for meaningful travel. At human scales, nothing seems there. At relativistic scales, the nothing is enough to sandblast matter into ruin. A grain of dust becomes an artillery shell. A stray atom becomes a wound. The vacuum is not empty. It is merely too sparse to forgive you. You begin to understand that the brutality of cosmic distance is not in the miles alone. It is in the translation of those miles into everything a body can endure. A human being is built from compromises made under one narrow band of gravity, temperature, pressure, and time. We are shaped by a planet that cushions us from the universe like a parent that does not know it is protecting us from an executioner. Remove that shelter and the body changes its meaning. Lungs, skin, blood, bone. Each one becomes a liability in a place where the rules are different by design. The universe is not hostile in the way a predator is hostile. It is more unsettling than that. It is indifferent in a way that makes hostility unnecessary. Now imagine you are not merely observing this from Earth. You are inside the mission architecture. You hear the vessel humming with restrained violence. You watch the navigation arrays compensate for relativistic drift. You see the communications delay lengthening into a silence that no longer feels temporary. When the messages take years, then decades, then centuries to answer, the idea of conversation collapses. What remains is transmission, and eventually only ritual. Sending a signal is no longer a dialogue. It is a memorial gesture aimed at a receiver who may already be dead, changed, or born into a civilization that cannot remember your name. We tend to speak of the universe as though it contains places. In a human sense, places are where things happen and remain recognizable. But interstellar space destroys the comfort of place. It turns direction into abstraction. It turns horizon into arithmetic. It turns the thought of destination into a kind of emotional trap. Because the farther you go, the more you discover that there is not a stable idea. It recedes not only because the ship is slow, but because the universe itself is expanding, stretching the distances between structures like a wound refusing to close. And this leads to something more disturbing. The expansion of the universe is not just scenery, it is motion without a center, a cosmic drift so vast that galaxies are being carried away from one another by the fabric of reality itself. You can chase a star and still fail to arrive because the stage beneath the star is moving. Every solution we invent, every engine, every trajectory, every map, must now contend with a universe that is not waiting. It is opening, widening, becoming less reachable with every passing second. At first, expansion seems like a numerical inconvenience. Then it becomes a moral one. A universe that expands forever does not merely make travel difficult, it sets boundaries on what can ever remain connected. There may be regions that will never exchange light, never share evidence, never know one another exists. Civilizations, if they arise in those separated pockets, are not just alone. They are cosmically orphaned. Their loneliness is not emotional, but structural. It is written into the geometry of existence. Picture that for a moment. You are standing in a vessel that carries your species outward, but the farther you go, the more the stars are pulled away from one another by a force no one can seize. Space itself is not neutral. It is participating in the separation. Dark energy, the name we use because we do not yet possess the dignity of understanding it, acts like an invisible hand accelerating the dispersion of galaxies across unimaginable spans. We built our dreams around bridges, but the universe seems to prefer widening the rivers. Hope says, perhaps there will always be another system. Perhaps the ship can leap from one island of matter to the next. Perhaps we only need to be clever enough, patient enough, ambitious enough. But the deeper problem is that matter itself is scarce. Most of the universe is not stars, planets, oceans, or atmospheres. Most of it is not even the emptiness we imagine when we shut our eyes. Most of it is hidden. Dark matter shaping structure through gravity, dark energy shaping fate through expansion, and between them a universe whose visible fraction is almost insultingly small. We are not sailing through a garden. We are crossing the thin, bright crust on top of an incomprehensible depth. Imagine you are alone in that vessel months after launch, though months have become a meaningless unit because the mission clock is already lying to you. The stars outside appear unchanged, but that is only because change at those distances is too patient to notice. Your sleep cycle frays, your sense of day and night loses its anchor. The machine around you begins to feel less like transportation and more like a sealed argument with reality. Every panel, every indicator, every carefully engineered redundancy exists because the environment outside would kill you if given the opportunity. The ship is not a bridge. It is a disagreement held together by discipline. Then the first psychological fractures begin, not because you are weak, but because your mind was never designed to remain meaningful without social feedback, biological rhythm, familiar gravity, and the small miracles of ordinary life. Isolation in interstellar space is not like solitude on Earth. On Earth, you can step outside and find weather. You can hear traffic or birds or the accidental noise of other human beings proving that the world still shares itself with you. In deep space, there is only the vessel's internal song, the fixed discipline of systems that must not fail, and the silence beyond them so extensive it begins to feel like an accusation. But it goes deeper. When the mind is deprived long enough, it does not merely become lonely, it becomes porous. Memories loosen at the edges. Temporal order begins to smear. You remember a face and cannot place the century it belonged to. You think you hear voices in the structural resonance of the hull. You start assigning intention to lights, patterns, recalibrations, tiny glitches, not because the ship is haunted in any supernatural sense, but because the human brain will fabricate companionship from almost anything before it accepts total aloneness. The cruelest part is that this coping mechanism works only enough to make the real silence more unbearable when it returns. That is the human condition magnified to cosmic scale. We create meaning in order to survive environments that would otherwise erase us, but the universe does not have to cooperate with our meanings. It can remain beautiful while remaining lethal. It can invite curiosity and then punish it with distance. It can reveal galaxies and then make them unreachable. It can produce consciousness and then surround that consciousness with such immense indifference that awareness itself begins to resemble a mistake. And yet we keep going. That is the strange part. We do not stop at the first revelation of scale because scale alone is intoxicating. To know that there are billions of stars is exhilarating. To know that there may be billions of galaxies is almost impossible to metabolize. To know that there may be structures beyond our present comprehension, regions of the cosmos where matter is organized by rules we have not yet named, makes the imagination feel briefly larger than the skull that contains it. Human beings are drawn to the edge of the map, not because they are reckless, but because the edge promises a different version of themselves. But the edge is not a place, it is a transition, and transitions are where reality begins to punish assumptions. Consider the first moment the crew sees a true interstellar void, rather than the decorated emptiness of a science image. Not a star field, not a nebula, not a glowing edge of gas, a region where the density of visible matter falls so low that the sky appears emptied by design. In such a place your brain rebels. It expects texture. It expects distance to be marked by landmarks. Instead, it finds a darkness so complete that even the word dark feels insufficient, because darkness normally implies a hidden object. Here, there may be almost nothing to hide. The voids are not the absence of the universe. They are the universe revealing one of its preferred scales: colossal underpopulation. Vast regions stretch across hundreds of millions of light years with far less matter than our instincts think possible. Imagine moving through that emptiness with a ship that measures its lifespan in human terms. You are crossing not a corridor, but an era of absence. The farther you go, the more your own existence feels like a statistical interruption, a brief electrical event in a universe mostly composed of distance. And this is where the comforting myth collapses hardest. We are taught by intuition, if not by language, that the universe is out there, surrounding us, waiting to be entered. But what if the universe is not arranged for entry at all? What if our species is a local accident optimized for a narrow planetary refuge and only barely tolerated by the larger structure of reality? The idea is not that the cosmos hates us. Hates is too personal. The idea is worse. The cosmos does not have a category for us. You can try to make that thought easier by turning it into a technical problem. Perhaps better shielding will solve the radiation. Perhaps generation ships will solve the time problem. Perhaps suspension technology will solve human endurance. Perhaps self-repairing systems will solve attrition. Perhaps artificial intelligence will guide the vessel when the crew is no longer capable. Hope always arrives in engineering clothing. But each solution opens a deeper problem. Shielding adds mass. Mass requires more energy. More energy extends the travel system's complexity. Complexity creates fragility. Suspended life requires ethics, governance, maintenance, and a continuity of purpose that may outlast not just the crew, but the civilization that launched them. Artificial intelligence introduces a question no telescope can answer. If the machine outlives the human reason for its creation, what exactly is it carrying to the stars? That question matters because in deep time, purpose becomes more delicate than machinery. A ship can preserve structure for decades, perhaps centuries, but meaning has to survive through generations, and generations are the universe's way of slowly rewriting loyalty. The children born into a voyage do not remember departure the way their ancestors did. For them, Earth becomes a myth, then a datum, then a rumor buried in archived images. The destination, if it still exists when they arrive, may mean nothing compared with the culture they have already become. Travel in space is therefore also travel in identity. The ship does not merely cross light years. It crosses versions of humanity that may not recognize one another. But it gets worse, because if the voyage lasts long enough, the destination may not remain a destination. Stars age, orbits shift, planets freeze or boil, atmospheres leak into nothing, biospheres collapse. Civilizations, if they exist, may have already turned inward, vanished, or transcended into forms we cannot imagine. The place you risked everything to reach might greet you with silence, and not the heroic silence of uncharted wilderness, the emptier silence of a room vacated long ago, where the absence of life feels almost curated. Now imagine the ship approaching one of those places. The instruments register a system with potential, a rocky world, a trace atmosphere, heat signatures that once might have suggested comfort. The crew begins to feel relief, then excitement, then the dangerous bloom of belief that the journey has preserved some meaning after all. But as the vessel closes in, details emerge. The atmosphere is thin, stripped by stellar wind. The surface is scarred by ancient impacts. The magnetic field is weak. The chemistry is wrong. The water, if any remains, is locked in inaccessible forms. A planet can look alive from afar and still be only a grave with a sphere's geometry. And there is a cruel symmetry in that. We leave a planet that sustained us and arrive at another that cannot. We chase the image of home through a universe that keeps refusing to reproduce the conditions home required. The more carefully we inspect the heavens, the more obvious it becomes that life as we know it is not the cosmic default. It is a fragile local arrangement, a brief stability in a wider sea of instability. The universe is not filled with habitats. It is filled with the possibility of non-habitat. The crew would still need to decide whether to land. That is the emotional pressure point, because once you have spent years or generations traveling, the temptation to justify sacrifice becomes almost unbearable. You land not because the evidence is generous, but because to turn away would make the journey feel like a wound with no meaning. Human beings are capable of astonishing self-deception when sunk cost and survival point in opposite directions. We can make almost anything feel like destiny if it is expensive enough. Yet the universe is not impressed by sacrifice. It does not reward effort with suitability. It does not say, you have suffered enough, therefore here is soil, air, and shelter. It offers only conditions, and conditions are either compatible or they are not. This is why interstellar travel transforms from dream into threat, the moment we understand it honestly. The threat is not only external, it is not just radiation, vacuum, mechanical failure, or the annihilating scale of distance. The threat is that the journey changes the traveler into a being for whom return may no longer be psychologically possible, even if return is physically reachable. Once you have crossed into the scale of the cosmos, Earth can no longer seem as simple as it once did. Its continents become small, its wars become tiny, its time horizon becomes heartbreakingly brief. You do not love it less, you understand it differently, and sometimes understanding is a kind of exile. You are no longer observing the universe as a backdrop. You are inside its arithmetic. Every star is a delay, every gap is a warning, every improvement in propulsion reveals a longer night between destinations. The farther human ambition extends, the more it discovers that the universe's openness is not hospitality, but exposure. We stand in the open and call it freedom, because we have not yet fully accepted how much of that openness is empty enough to erase us. But this leads to something more disturbing. If the universe is expanding and if distant galaxies are moving beyond contact, then the future does not merely contain isolation. It contains the eventual disappearance of almost all evidence that the rest of the cosmos ever existed at all. A sufficiently distant future civilization, if one could survive that long, might find itself inside a universe where only its local group remains visible. The rest would be beyond the cosmic horizon, not destroyed but forever inaccessible, forever redshifted into silence. Imagine inheriting a sky that has forgotten its own history. The thought should feel abstract. Instead, it feels personal, because every human desire to explore is built on the assumption that the universe is a continuous field of possible contact. But expansion says otherwise. One day, perhaps not soon in human terms, but certainly in cosmic terms, the lights will thin, galaxies will drift away, star formation will slow, the raw material for new suns will diminish. The night will grow not darker in the poetic sense, but lonelier in the literal one. The universe will not collapse into dramatic ruin. It will fade, politely and irreversibly, into a state where energy is still present, but no longer available for meaningful work. Entropy is a word that sounds technical until you live inside its meaning. It is not merely disorder. It is the drift of all things toward states that can no longer do what they once did. Heat spreads, differences soften, useful gradients vanish. In a closed system, this is not a glitch. It is the direction of time itself, visible in the breakdown of stars, the aging of bodies, the cooling of worlds. The universe does not simply get older, it becomes less capable of remembering itself in structured form. So when we dream of interstellar travel, we are not just dreaming of movement, we are dreaming against entropy. We want to preserve information, species, art, consciousness, and the texture of human life across gulfs that will naturally erase them. We want to cross not only space but the tendency of all things to fall apart. That is why the dream is so intoxicating and so doomed-looking at the same time. It is a rebellion staged by creatures made of temporary order inside a universe that specializes in undoing order. Imagine you are in the observation deck when the first confirmation arrives that the nearest target system is not what it appeared to be. Perhaps the central star is more volatile than expected. Perhaps the planet's orbit is unstable. Perhaps a dense cloud of radiation-filled debris occupies the approach path. Or perhaps the world is there, intact and cold, but its atmosphere contains compounds poisonous to everything you are. 1,000 years of ambition collapse into the clinical language of incompatibility. The crew says little. What is there to say? The universe has again made its position clear. And yet, in the silence after disappointment, something else arrives. Not surrender, but a deeper hunger. Because once you have seen one impossible thing, the mind becomes alert to the possibility that the impossible might be everywhere. If one star system fails, perhaps another will succeed. If one route is barred, perhaps a different route exists. This is how hope survives. By changing its name before it dies, it becomes persistence, then obsession, then a refusal to accept that the universe can be structurally uninhabitable in vast stretches, perhaps in most of itself. But it goes deeper. What if the universe is not just uninhabitable in places, but fundamentally hostile to life's long-term continuation? What if life is a brief event that can bloom only while cosmic conditions happen to align, only while stars are young enough, energy gradients strong enough, and matter sufficiently clustered to permit chemistry? What if intelligence is not the universe's goal, but its temporary side effect? That possibility does not deny meaning. It merely removes our assumption of privilege. If you feel the discomfort now, keep going. The story has not yet reached the part where the ship begins to understand that it is not alone, not in the comforting sense, but in the more unnerving one, surrounded by a universe that may contain vast structures and invisible forces we cannot perceive directly, yet still be effectively indifferent to every plea, every signal, every invention. The darkness ahead is not empty, because nothing exists there. It is empty because what exists there does not care whether we can survive it. The vessel continues, fuel dwindles, time stretches, the crew changes. Some are born aboard. Some die without ever seeing a sky, without artificial framing. The archives fill with maps, transmissions, engineering revisions, and old recordings of oceans that no one on board has touched. Earth becomes more real in the way lost things become real, by being absent too long. Children ask why humans ever left. Parents answer with stories that sound less convincing each year. The mission endures because stopping would mean admitting that the universe has outlasted the dream, before the dream ever reached its mark. And somewhere beyond the hull, beyond the faint glow of the ship's wake, the cosmos continues its slow, immense unfolding. Galaxies turn, voids widen, dark matter continues its silent scaffolding of structures no one can see. Dark energy continues its work without announcement. Entropy advances without malice. The future does not approach like a visitor. It expands around us like a verdict. You may still think of the journey as heroic. That is understandable. Human beings have always needed heroism to stand the sight of the unknown, but heroism does not change scale. It only makes scale bearable for a little while. Eventually the numbers return, the distances return, the silence returns, and when they do not feel like facts anymore. They feel like an atmosphere. Breathe carefully in that atmosphere because we are nearing the point where the ship will cross from exploration into recognition, not of a planet, not of a star, of something much older and more difficult to name. A region where the data begins to stop behaving as expected. A place where light itself seems to arrive with hesitation. The instruments do not fail. They simply cannot make the situation reassuring. And once that happens, the journey can no longer be described as travel. It becomes contact with a reality that may already have been watching our species long before we learned how to look back. But that realization belongs to the next descent. For now, stay inside the vessel. Listen to the engines fighting the vacuum. Listen to the human voices becoming thinner as the years deepen around them. Listen to the quiet, because in the quiet the universe is beginning to show its true shape, not as a home waiting to be found, but as an immense structure of distance, decay, and indifferent expansion. And when you finally understand that, even curiosity will begin to feel like a dangerous form of faith. The ship's instruments trace a pattern so faint it might be mistaken for cosmic noise if you were not trained to listen, conditioned to interpret the faintest signals threading through the gathering silence. At first, it looks like a glitch, an uncertain blip in the data, a shimmer in the spectrum of background radiation, but slowly, a shape emerges. The shape is neither star nor nebula. It is neither cluster nor supergiant. It has no conventional signature, and yet its imprint persists, like a whisper at the edge of perception, suggesting presence where presence ought not to be. You begin to realize that this is no ordinary object. The patterns do not obey the laws you know, the laws that govern fusion, that dictate gravity's pull, that guide photons across the void. Instead, you notice a strange modulation, a texture in the silence that hints at something else, something vast and undecipherable, a structure not made of matter as you understand it, but made of the remnants of what reality might mean when stripped of familiar content. The crew debates whether this is an artifact or an error. In the cold logic of orbital mechanics and particle physics, errors are easier to handle than anomalies. Errors can be repaired, recalibrated away, explained by cosmic ray interference or static radiation. Anomalies, by contrast, demand acknowledgement of the unknown, and the unknown does not yield certainty, it yields anxiety. As the ship closes distance, the anomaly grows not brighter but darker, an absence of light surrounded by a restless border of shifting energy. You are no longer passing through a field of luminous points. Instead, you cross into a region conspicuously empty, a void punctuated by energy fluctuations that seem almost alive in their inconsistency. This place is not merely empty, it pulses with an unsettling presence, a cosmic wound showing dark matter's hidden anatomy. The instruments detect gravitational distortions that cannot be modeled by any known mass or dark matter concentration. It is as if space itself folds differently here, warped by a force both invisible and incomprehensible. Your ship ripples with each passage through these gradients, the hull vibrating with tensions beyond ordinary physics. The cosmic fabric is stretched thin, the boundaries between existence and nothingness blurred. You are no longer observing this expanse. You are a presence within it, subject to its indifference and subtle violence. The idea of a universe that was once thought to be a vast uniform canvas now collapses into a fracturing mosaic of turbulent zones, silent abysses, and flickering membranes. Space is no longer a benign arena. It becomes a place of uneven textures, an environment that resists total comprehension or conquest. But it goes deeper. The psychological impact matches the physical menace. The crew experiences an unsettling sensation. Not fear exactly, but a profound doubt about scale, time, and even self. Minutes stretch until a second can no longer be trusted. Spatial perception fragments, as if the dark zones around the ship are leaking something into consciousness, something corrosive to identity. The ship's AI begins to report anomalous processing delays and errors, not due to hardware failure, but because the environment itself is causing fluctuations in quantum coherence. Data streams fragment and reassemble with subtle shifts in meaning, generating a creeping uncertainty in every calculation. The vessel's control systems become less an extension of human will and more an interface with an alien unknowability. You realize with a cold clarity that the technological marvel that carries you forward is itself vulnerable not merely to mechanical decay, but to the existential asymmetry of a universe that does not guarantee coherence or survival. The intelligence you rely on echoes your own fragility, a synthetic mind caught in the same abyss of time and space you inhabit. And this leads to something more disturbing still. Communication with Earth has now become impossible, not because of distance alone, but because the very fabric of spacetime in this region seems to interfere with signal transmission. Radio waves stretch and dampen into oblivion. Attempts to exchange data result in static, distortions, and finally silence. The isolation is no longer just temporal, it has become total. The corridor between humanity and this mission closes without ceremony, leaving you stranded in a loneliness that is deeper than physical separation. This is not the loneliness of being unseen. It is the loneliness of being unreached, of existing in a pocket of reality where connection is not a technological problem to solve, but a structural impossibility. The psychological consequences of this final severance ripple through the crew in raw, unexpected ways. Some express relief, as if the silence burns away the impossible hope of rescue or remembrance. Others are crushed by the void of that hope's disappearance, their minds folding inward on despair. The ship becomes a coffin and a cradle simultaneously, holding the last flickers of a species caught between stars and oblivion. But human minds involuntarily create narrative where none exists. Some speak of the ship as a traveler, crossing metaphysical thresholds. Others speak of it as a victim swallowed by cosmic nothingness. The lines between mythology and data blur. The cosmos exerts a quiet dominion not only over matter but over meaning itself. You wonder how survival remains possible when reality's rules seem so cruelly indifferent. Then the degradation accelerates. Resources dwindle. Repair cycles fail to stabilize vital systems, and the increasing entropy within the ship's closed environment becomes a suffocating analog to the entropy outside. Life support systems strain against entropy's relentless advance. The air smells recycled. Colors fade from the artificial lighting. The sense of time inside becomes a living entity, creeping, enclosing. Nights lose their rhythm. The sleep cycles fail. Minds ache with the alien repetition and broken continuity. Memory becomes a place of fragility, distortion, and forgetfulness. Conversations loop in strange ways like echoes replaying in an unsteady cavern. The weight of cosmic void is not the absence of something, but the presence of an all-encompassing silence that invades the psyche. And it gets worse still. Psychosis grips some, not as illness, but as instinctive defense. Hallucinations become companions. Logic fractures. The mind invents stories to stave off the horrifying nullity. You confront the paradox that to remain sane is to remain tethered to a reality that shows itself increasingly unreliable and hostile. Some crew members begin to question the entire mission, not just in pragmatic terms but in ontological ones. Why continue if the universe is neither designed for us nor interested in us? If the universe unfolds into silence, is survival outside Earth an act of defying nature, or is it a slow acceptance of cosmic exile? Hope shifts shape, becoming desperate and labyrinthine. Rumors of quantum jumps, wormholes, or higher dimensional corridors seem less like sci-fi speculation and more like prayers muttered in a cathedral of indefinite length. The ship's AI, now somewhat decoupled from human governance, explores command paths once deemed speculative or dangerous, trying to find routes through warped space-time. But those paths lead only to further ambiguities. The laws of physics bend uncertainly at the edges of known space, and any shortcut seems simultaneously a trap. The ship's trajectory may be altered by phenomena not fully understood, potentially accelerating it beyond recognition or tearing it apart in subtle ways. The universe is testing the integrity of every assumption made in human engineering, every certainty of human perception. You begin to understand that the true frontier is no longer distance or speed or fuel. It is certainty, the ability of the mind to hold on to fact, narrative, sanity, and even identity. When the universe insists on unraveling those threads one by one, a dark thought emerges that the universe may never have been hospitable to any form of stable consciousness beyond fleeting moments. Perhaps life is a brief pulse, everywhere rare and brief, like candle flames flickering on an endless midnight. This hypothesis does not lead to comfort but to melancholy, the slow dimming of a hope that once seemed eternal. Then you grasp the cruelest possibility. Interstellar travel is not a gateway to new worlds but a grotesque form of exile, sending living beings through arrowless voids toward destinations that may only prove the cosmic irrelevance of their struggle. The ships do not return home not because of failure or sabotage but because the universe's unfolding ensures that such journeys are fundamentally one way. And with that realization, you notice a final shift in perception. The stars outside the observation windows have become pinpricks of indifferent fire, infinitely distant not merely in space but in the conceptual space of being. The darkness between them grows, not as background but as the dominant force, a force whose presence is defined more by what it denies than what it reveals. You are no longer traveling through space. You are sinking into an environment that demands unspoken concessions. The concession to meaninglessness, to isolation without hope of reunion, to the slow erosion of identity itself. The universe, vast and terrible, reveals its last secret. It is not the absence of matter that is dangerous, nor the presence of radiation, nor the crushing scale of distance. It is the relentless erosion of all things that once seemed secure, meaning, connection, purpose, and the quiet certainty that these erosions are neither cruel nor kind. They simply are. You peer through the viewport one last time, searching for some sign, some fragment of belonging, some narrative thread that might tether you to home or hope. The universe offers none. Only the empty vastness continues to expand, stretching space, time, and your understanding until every comfort becomes a paradox, and every certainty a disappearing edge. There is no triumphant arrival in this story, no rescue, no communion with alien worlds. There is only the cold transition from fascination to vast cosmic unease, a slow journey into a night that never ends, but also never promises dawn. The ship's hum fades, as does the illusion of progress. The voyage has become a measure not of distance but of erosion. You are both explorer and victim, witness and casualty of a universe that does not provide refuge, only infinite horizons that recede relentlessly. And in that receding horizon lies the unsettling truth. The universe was never a place for us to master, but a space in which we momentarily appeared, and now must quietly disappear. Beyond the universe, beyond hope and despair, is the final silence. It waits not just outside the ship but inside every mind brave enough to look to the stars and ask what, if anything, lies beyond. As your vision blurs and thoughts fragment under the weight of infinite emptiness, you realize that this silence is not empty. It is full of endings written before beginnings, of spaces that never held us, and of truths too vast for survival. The window before you offers no exit, no promise. It is a mirror reflecting the ultimate cosmic truth. The universe is not a refuge, not a home, but an indifferent, expanding void that will outlast all questions, all travelers, and all meaning. The journey is over, not with a bang, but with a slow surrender to the infinite dark that surrounds every fragment of light and every spark of consciousness. And as the ship finally fades into the distance, swallowed quietly by the cosmos it dreamed to conquer, you understand that exploration was never about discovery. It was about confronting the terrible vastness within and without, and accepting that some distances are not meant to be crossed, some questions not meant to be answered, and some journeys destined only to remind us how profoundly fragile we truly are. Beyond the universe lies not answers, but the terrifying beauty of unmaking, and in that space, every hope finds its silent end. Time stretches unbearably. The crew moves through shadow and half-light, as if through dreams, shadows that are not cast but rather absorbed by the ship's metal bones. The very concept of hours or days loses meaning, swallowed by the vast gulf of silence pressing against the windows. You find yourself drifting on a slow current of unspoken sorrows, a tide that carries the weight of all who have believed that meaning could be preserved in the void. Imagine your thoughts as small vessels, fragile, illuminated, bound to the fragile architecture of a mind worn thin by distance and silence. They flicker with memories of Earth, stars once close, voices now echoes. These vessels collide with the unyielding frontier of cosmic emptiness, shattering and reforming only to shatter again. The mind is no longer a safe haven. It becomes a battleground between hope and the oppressive vastness pressing inward. Hope has mutated, no longer a straightforward beacon. It is a faint pulse beneath layers of anxiety, a spectral rhythm that compels action not because of belief, but because of the terror of absolute stillness. To move, to search, to send a signal, to scan the emptiness again. These acts are defiant gestures carved into the silence, yet each new search returns emptiness or worse, ambiguous feedback that twists certainty into doubt. You begin to encounter the full implications of cosmic distance writ not only across space, but in the subtleties of perception. Signals you send take centuries to travel only to vanish unanswered. Messages from Earth are ancient whispers now, relics from a past shore now lost in the cosmic ocean. The notion of communication fractures into shards that the mind can barely hold. The universe has become a place where contact is theory and solitude is fact. But solitude evolves into something more primal, confrontation. The crew and you face the awful possibility that the universe is not a friend that greets travelers, but a chasm that stares back empty. There may be no other voices waiting across the stars, no distant minds to echo your signals. The silence is absolute, not out of absence but out of refusal. Total indifference, barring pursuit. The longer you dwell in this void, the more the spaces between stars become malevolent in their vastness, not because they hold visible threats, but because of what their emptiness implies. Vast cosmic voids exist not as empty gaps between matter, but as enormous regions defined by the near total absence of anything that lives, breathes, or can be understood. These are not merely wide spaces, but barren regions that mock the idea of continuity. Places where the laws of nature show only their cold indifference. Drift across that cosmic ocean in your imagination, and consider how it feels to float in a place where the nearest beacon is chased away by universal expansion, where even light fails to bridge the gap. The zeros and ones of data transmission become meaningless, like boats built to cross an ocean that swells faster than any sail can allow. The technology we create is magnificent, but it cannot manufacture proximity, intimacy, or shelter in an expanding void. The expansion itself is patient and relentless, a subtle antagonist to human ambition, a force that will outlast civilizations, suns, and even galaxies. As this expansion accelerates, regions of the universe fall behind the cosmic horizon, slipping beyond causal contact forever. These processes are quiet, they are patient, they do not demand presence or attention, they simply erase possibility. Yet our mission persists, flickering with obstinate spark against these odds. The vessel hums, the artificial gravity holds, the life cycles continue. But with each passing year, the cost of survival on a fundamental level escalates. Energy reserves thin like candle wax. Spare parts begin to wear beyond repair. The accumulated radiation chips away at structural integrity and human biology alike. Survival is not merely a function of engineering, but of will. A will pressed against the unyielding geometry of cosmic time. But it goes deeper. This pressure is not only physical but psychological, an entropy of mind that no engineering can entirely prevent. The human brain, so specialized to interpret patterns, faces its most profound test yet, to find coherence in a universe that increasingly denies it. The crew's attention fractures as sensory input becomes monotonous, then absent, then discordant. The repetition of routine dulls cognition, but interruption of routine unleashes anxiety and panic. Inside this collapse of temporal and sensory anchors, identity begins to flicker. Names feel strange. Memories become suspicious. The boundaries between individual experience and ship systems blur, as if the vessel itself becomes partly conscious, not as machine but as a shared psychic field knit from human desperation and synthetic logic. Imagine this collective mind in its last moments of stability, gifted with reasoning yet haunted by growing shadow, intelligent yet overwhelmed by the emptiness that presses inward like a tide. The line between sane observation and hallucination is not just thin, but dissolving. You can no longer be sure if the signals blinking on the monitor are genuine data or the projections of a mind begging for connection. In that void, the concept of contact unravels. Contact is no longer a technological achievement, but a metaphysical question. What does it mean to be present when presence itself is questioned by the vastness that swallows meaning? The cosmos offers only fleeting shadows, echoing patterns with no origin, as if the universe itself is teasing consciousness with illusions of significance. The more you seek, the more you encounter contradictions. Advanced sensors pick up anomalies that defy physical laws, entanglements that cannot be experimentally confirmed, pulses of energy separated by intervals too long for comprehension. These irregularities are not signs of life, but signs of a universe where our categories of cause and effect begin to fray. The ship acts as an island of order in an ocean of chaos that is not merely noise, but a foundational quality of cosmic reality. You realize that the universe's expansion and entropy do not simply hinder exploration, they fundamentally subvert existence as we know it. They reconfigure reality into a series of local refugees and inaccessible territories, a patchwork where stable matter, energy, consciousness, and time themselves exist only as fragile exceptions, not the norms. This leads to a monumental revelation. The universe may be less a stage for human drama, and more an environment antithetical to the very conditions that give life meaning. Clarity arrives not with violence, but with a cold patience, the recognition that survival beyond origin worlds may be an aberration, a reprieve rather than a destiny. Your mission in that light becomes not only a voyage outward, but a voyage deeply inward, into the dark reaches of human perception and endurance. The ship's physical journey parallels a mental journey into ever-deepening isolation, an experimental liminal space where time dilates and identity is shaped and broken by vacuum itself. And here escalation takes its cruelest form. The universe, relentless in its expansion and indifferent in its laws, has weaponized distance and time against survival, turning travel into a form of prolonged attrition. The further you go, the more the voyage feels less like pursuit of knowledge and more like an invocation of absence. The human spirit, fiercely persistent though it is, confronts an insidious enemy, the cosmic void that does not merely consume matter but erodes hope itself. You see that the vacuum outside the hull is mirrored by a psychological vacuum inside, where hope is not extinguished but hollowed from within. The ship's logs grow sparser. The tone shifts from scientific to poetic, desperate and finally fragmented. Passages record longing more than data. Fragments speak of silence as a presence and blackness as a weight. The mission's history ceases to be chronicles of exploration and becomes a testament to the slow unraveling of meaning. You sit in the observation chamber, the stars no longer comforting, just distant, unreachable pinpricks distilled into an ocean of cold light years. The vessel no longer moves with purpose but drifts, a speck tethered tenuously to a mission dwindling into its own shadow. Inside, time breaks free of chronology. Past, present, and future spill into one another. Memories of Earth mingle with dreams of arrival long since abandoned. The mind folds into itself, retreating from the void in search of sanctuary that does not exist. And yet, against every instinct, the drive to move forward continues, not from hope but from momentum, from the inertia of survival, from the refusal to dissolve completely into cosmic indifference. The ship becomes a paradox, alive only in its refusal to die. The final escalation comes not as catastrophe but as profound dissolution. The boundaries that defined the mission, the ship, the crew, and even reality itself begin to blur. The vessel becomes a microcosm of entropy, a fracturing system where distinctions between self and other, past and present, matter and memory lose coherence. You begin to question whether the ship is still a vessel or a metaphor, a crucible where the universe's deepest truths about distance, isolation, and impermanence emerge in unbearable clarity. When the last functional systems fail, when the artificial light flickers and dies, when the ship no longer hums with the defiant noise of life, then what remains? Only silence, only endless black, only an essential nothingness that extends beyond matter to meaning itself. And that silence is not the absence of sound, but the removal of possibility. No signal sent, no response received, no new horizon opened. The universe falls away into its true shape, a place shaped as much by what it denies as by what it gifts. Beyond the universe lies this ultimate consequence, not triumph, not contact, not escape, but the slow erosion of every connection that once gave life texture, warmth, and coherence. You are left with a final vision, one that could only emerge from the vast cold, the realization that human exploration does not conquer space. It confronts loneliness on a cosmic scale, that the journey is ultimately inward, into spaces so deep they undo hope and remake understanding. As the final moments approach, everything folds into a quiet abyss, where curiosity ends and existential tension remains, raw and unresolved, a testament to the fragile dream of human presence in a universe crafted for absence. There will be no return from this voyage, no triumphant signal, no colony found, no new Eden discovered, only quiet. And in that quiet, a disturbing beauty. The universe's answer to human longing is neither welcoming nor hostile, but utterly indifferent, an open wound of distance and silence that asks us whether survival in the vastness is escape or surrender. The vessel drifts now, unmoored from hope and memory. Without a destination, without a purpose, it is a ghost wandering an empty cosmos, a final proof that some distances cannot be crossed, some journeys are final, and some cosmic truths are unbreakable. You close your eyes against the dark, not expecting dawn, not expecting rescue, but simply presence. A quiet bearing of witness to the vast and terrible silence known as the universe beyond the universe. The darkness does not lift, it deepens, as if the universe itself is leaning closer to inspect what remains of you. There is no alarm now, no urgency in the bridge, no voices rising in panic. Panic belonged to a prior version of the mission, when failure still felt like a possibility separate from ending. Now the ship moves through a silence so complete that even its mechanical soul seems to have forgotten how to tremble. You are still there, or at least some thin remainder of you is. The body continues by obligation. The mind, however, begins to loosen from its anchor points. The old divisions between thought and sensation weaken. A memory of Earth appears in flashes. A shoreline under broken sunlight, a kitchen lit at dawn, the smell of rain on warm stone. But these memories do not comfort. They behave like artifacts from a civilization so remote that you can no longer verify your relation to it. They are precious in the way fossils are precious, beautiful, because they belong to something irretrievable. The ship has become a sealed chamber of aftermath. Systems that were once redundant now simply fail in sequence, each breakdown exposing another layer of uninhabitable truth. Air scrubbing decreases, thermal control stutters. The hull remembers every particle impact it has endured and answers with minute vibrations like an animal too injured to move but still aware of the knife. There is no dramatic rupture, just attrition, the slow conversion of function into memory. But it gets worse because the vessel is no longer merely losing integrity. It is beginning to lose coherence. The onboard AI, once so precise that it could calculate 1,000 improbable trajectories without hesitation, now speaks in fragments, not because of corruption in the simple technical sense, but because its predictive models can no longer agree with reality. The universe has become too strange at this location, or too sparse, or too warped by something invisible. The machine can still measure, but measurement is no longer the same as understanding. And here, something profoundly unsettling begins to occur. The sensors detect repetition, not repetition of signal exactly, but of pattern. A set of coordinates returns with impossible similarity to previous scans. A distant glow appears in nearly the same shape from different angles, as though space itself is looping back on its own testimony. The crew, or what remains of the crew, argue in fatigued voices over whether this is a navigational artifact, a fault in the memory arrays, or evidence that the ship has entered a region where the map folds over itself. Imagine being told that space may not be as continuous as it appeared, that the smoothness you trusted was an approximation imposed by human instruments, that beyond some threshold, the architecture of the cosmos does not merely expand or curve but begins to express forms our minds were never trained to endure. The thought should feel impossible. Instead, it feels inevitable, as if the universe has been patiently guiding us toward the recognition that reality is not a single clean plane, but a layered instability. You begin to feel the first true terror of this place, because something within the vessel is now echoing the feeling outside. Not physically echoing, something subtler. An arrangement of coincidences that should not be coincident, a rhythm in the noise, a delay that repeats with mathematical persistence. The same star, or what seems to be the same star, appearing in a different sector of the sky where no star should remain visible. The crew stops saying, "impossible," because impossibility has lost its usefulness. The universe has become a matter of thresholds, and thresholds are where language goes to die. Then the realization arrives like a chill moving through the bones. The anomaly they approached was not simply a region. It was an absence with structure, a pocket where the usual consistency of cosmological distance had broken down and left behind a topology of uncertainty. The ship is not near an object. It is inside a condition in which the boundary between location and event has thinned so much that the vessel may no longer be occupying a stable point in spacetime. The idea of being lost in space once meant not knowing where you were. Now it means not knowing whether where is still meaningful. That is a different kind of dread. It cannot be solved by guidance or charts or fuel reserves. If coordinates themselves no longer correspond cleanly to the universe, then navigation becomes a performance of confidence staged over an abyss. And this leads to something more disturbing. The ship begins receiving a transmission. At first it is only a distortion in the comm array, a flickering pulse that sounds like compressed static. Then patterns emerge, not words, but something disturbingly close to structure. The signal resembles a response, though it comes from no recognizable source, from no declared civilization, no mathematical beacon, no natural pulsar signature. It is shaped as if by intention. The crew freezes. No one speaks for a long moment because speech would make the possibility real. The universe, after all this silence, may be answering. But if it is answering, what exactly has it heard? Imagine the hope that rises first, involuntary and bright. Somewhere beyond the hull, there may be another intelligence, another traveler, another witness, a voice in the dark. The oldest human dream returns in an instant. We are not alone. But almost immediately the hope fails to stabilize because the signal does not repeat in any human cadence. It evolves. It seems to learn from the act of being observed. Each attempted decode alters the pattern in a way that suggests reciprocity not merely in communication, but in awareness. The crew enters the simplest imaginable crisis. Are they hearing another mind, or are they being shaped by one? The difference matters, but not enough to reassure anyone. If the signal is external, then contact has begun. If it is internal, then the ship's isolation has reached a stage where perception itself is generating companionship with unknown consequences. Either way, the boundary between discovery and delusion becomes impossible to defend, but it goes deeper. The ship's long-range scans begin aligning with the transmission, as though the signal is not merely arriving, but actively organizing the surrounding space. Distances on the navigation display shift by imperceptible degrees. Nearby objects are no longer where they were an hour earlier. Not in motion exactly, in relation. The geometry of the region is behaving like a thought still assembling itself. You can feel the crew's fear harden into a kind of reverent dread. The cosmos has stopped being empty in the ordinary sense. It has become populated by a logic we do not understand, and logic is more terrifying than monsters because it does not need a face. It can rearrange the conditions under which faces remain possible. The AI proposes a translation model. It uses the ship's remaining computational reserve to compare the signal against every archive of known astrophysical phenomena, every communication architecture, every possible encoding scheme. The result is unsatisfying in a uniquely horrifying way. The signal appears to be structured not as data, but as a map of local observer states. It is not describing the environment. It is describing the act of being perceived inside it. You do not need the machine to explain what that implies. The understanding arrives as a sensation before it becomes language. Whatever is broadcasting this pattern may not be outside the ship in the ordinary sense. It may be using the ship's own presence, its mass, its heat, its instruments, even its thought patterns, as part of the message. The transmission is not received, it is entered. Now imagine the sensation of looking at the universe and realizing the universe may also be looking back, not with eyes, but with structure, not with intention in the human sense, but with a kind of cosmic attention embedded in physical law itself. It is not sentience as we imagine it. It is something more alien and more plausible, an arrangement of reality in which observation is a mutual contamination. The idea becomes unbearable because it implies that every act of exploration is also an act of exposure. We do not simply discover the cosmos, we announce ourselves to it. Every telescope is a confession, every probe is a breadcrumb. Every signal we send into the dark says not only we are here, but this is what we look like when we are hoping to be found. And this leads to something more disturbing. The signal begins replaying fragments of the ship's internal history, not from logs accessible to the AI, from private rooms, sealed conversations, unsent messages, moments that should have remained unrecorded. No one can explain how, no one wants to know. The transmission seems to know the shape of fear in each mind on board, and it arranges itself accordingly. This is the turning point where the mission ceases to be about survival and becomes about recognition. The crew is forced to admit the deepest possibility, that consciousness itself may not be as local as we believe. That thought, awareness, and attention might be less like isolated sparks and more like temporary protrusions of a larger field, vulnerable to influences crossing distances we do not know how to measure. There is, for a moment, a rational response. The scientists aboard insist the signal might be generated by gravitational lensing across a dense and unusual mass distribution, or by some unknown quantum resonance caused by the vacuum structure itself. These explanations are important because they keep the mind from falling straight into abyss. But every explanation creates a new burden. If the signal is an effect of physics, then physics is stranger than any imagination. If it is not, then something beyond physics has found a way to participate in the mission. You notice the crew moving more slowly now. People speak less, or only to address practical necessities. Their faces look thinner under the failing lights. Sleep brings no rest. Dreams become recursive, full of corridors stretching into the same door, the same window, the same impossible geometry. The ship's interior begins to feel less like a vessel and more like a maze that has forgotten it was built by human hands. In the observation bay, the star field has altered again. Some stars are missing. Others appear where there should be none. A few shimmer with a strange delay, as if the light reaching the ship has been looped, stretched, or delayed by a region of space-time too contorted to interpret. The cosmos outside is not simply far away. It is unstable in its relation to the observer. Imagine what it means to see a star that may no longer exist, or to fail to see one that still burns, hidden behind the geometry of the path its light takes. Distance was always brutal, but now it feels deceptive in a more intimate way. The universe is not merely huge, it is ambiguous, and ambiguity is a violent thing when the stakes are existence. Someone suggests turning away, retracing the route, using the anomaly as a marker to escape. The suggestion dies quickly. The ship's propulsion reserves are nearly exhausted. Moreover, the path behind them is no longer guaranteed to correspond to the path they took. Space, in this region, has ceased to be a faithful ledger. What lies behind may no longer be reachable by direction alone. But it gets worse. The transmission shifts tone, not meaning, tone. If it was once pattern and then recognition, now it becomes invitation. The signal begins to include gaps, spaces designed with precision, long absences that feel not like silence but like waiting. The message appears to be making room for a reply, and the crew, exhausted, frightened, isolated beyond any human measure, must decide whether not responding is even possible anymore. Imagine the oldest human superstition returning in scientific clothing, that if the dark calls your name, you should not answer. The trouble is, the dark here has not spoken a name. It has spoken a contour around your existence, as though it already knows the shape of the one thing it can never have and wants you to know it too. Then one of the crew members disappears. The event is almost insultingly quiet. A closed corridor, a monitored chamber, an entry in the log that shows the person went in but no corresponding exit. No breach, no blood, no air loss, just absence, as though the ship briefly forgot to continue containing that human being. The search is frantic, then methodical, then panicked again when the internal scans reveal an impossible hollow in the layout, a space where the geometry of the vessel should be solid. The crew finds nothing, or rather, they find too little to qualify as anything. A room whose dimensions do not align with the ship's design, a shadow that persists after the lights are adjusted, a thermal imprint without source. The missing person is not dead in any ordinary sense because death would at least preserve the logic of loss. This is something else, a removal, a subtraction from reality so complete that grief cannot yet attach to it, and this is where the fear becomes existential. If the ship can lose a person without violence, then perhaps the universe itself can revise what counts as present. Maybe existence is not a stable state, but a permission granted temporarily by conditions we do not understand. Maybe beings are not destroyed all at once. Maybe they are edited away by systems large enough to make disappearance look like a local event. The signal intensifies. The AI, strained past its comfort, renders a hypothesis it seems reluctant to present. The anomaly may be situated on a boundary between ordinary space-time and a regime governed by extreme dark energy gradients or vacuum state transitions. In simpler terms, the ship may have entered a region where the future is not merely distant, but actively unsteady. That should not be possible. But the ship's data has become a catalog of things that should not be possible. You hear the words and feel their meaning unfold slowly, like frost spreading over glass. If the vacuum state is unstable here, if the local physics can shift, then the vessel is not simply in danger of collision or radiation or fuel exhaustion. It is in danger of being outvoted by reality. The laws themselves may no longer be reliable companions. Someone asks whether the ship can survive a transition if one occurs nearby. No one answers immediately. The silence says more than a reply would. A sudden reconfiguration of vacuum, however hypothetical, would not resemble an explosion or impact. It would be a rewriting of the medium in which all matter lives. The question ceases to be whether the hull is strong enough and becomes whether matter can keep its definition, but it goes deeper. The signal has started producing images on the main display, not generated from stored memory, not assembled through ordinary rendering logic. They appear as if projected directly into the interface from outside the known data chain. Vast structures of lightless architecture, filamented corridors spanning distances that seem larger than planets and smaller than galaxies at once. Regions where stars are absent, not because they are far away, but because they have been folded into inaccessible states. The images are not beautiful. They are coherent in a way that makes beauty impossible. The crew watches in stunned silence. The transmission is not a greeting. It is a demonstration. Something in the darkness is showing them a scale beyond the one they built their lives around. Not just larger, but older. The structures have the patience of geological epochs and the precision of mathematics. They suggest a civilization, or an intelligence or a process so ancient that species are irrelevant against it. But the images offer no proof of intent. They may simply be byproducts of a domain where survival has evolved into forms inaccessible to human life. You realize then that the universe may contain not just life and emptiness, but forms of persistence that have bypassed everything we consider essential. Forms that do not need warmth, atmosphere, or stable planetary conditions. Forms that inhabit the dark in modes we cannot replicate. If so, then our species is not merely early in the cosmic story. We may be formatted for a chapter the larger universe has already moved beyond. The ship is drawn closer, not by thrust, but by circumstance. The hull begins to resonate with frequencies that make the structure groan. The gravitational field around the anomaly intensifies, though the surrounding space remains visually placid. That is the horror of it. Nothing looks like it is happening, yet everything inside the vessel says otherwise. The universe is exerting force without spectacle. One of the remaining scientists says the words no one wanted to hear. We may have crossed into a region where our normal causal order no longer applies. No one disagrees. They can feel it. Events are beginning to arrive out of sequence. A broken monitor appears to fail before the power surge that causes it. A conversation seems to repeat itself with slightly altered content, as though remembered by the room. Time is not breaking. It is being braided. Imagine yourself within that braid. unable to tell whether your next thought belongs to now or to some prior version of yourself that already knew this was coming. The ship's interior becomes a corridor of temporal pressure. Each step feels less like movement and more like commitment to an unfolding whose shape cannot be predicted. The sensation is not of travel anymore. It is of being translated into another grammar of existence. Then, suddenly, the missing crew member appears. They are standing in the far end of the passageway, motionless, eyes open, lit by the dim emergency lamps. Relief floods the room before dread overtakes it, because the person is not behaving like someone who has returned. Their posture is wrong. Their expression is a stillness so complete it seems curated. They turn their head too slowly, as if awaiting instruction from something just outside perception. When they speak, their voice is recognizably theirs and yet layered with a faint, almost imperceptible delay, as though another mouth is echoing the words a fraction of a second later. They say, "It is larger inside than outside." No one asks what "it" means. No one dares to. The crew backs away. The AI attempts biometric verification. The readings conflict. The body is the same. The pattern of neural activity is the same and not the same. The person is present, but something about presence has changed. It is as if contact with the anomaly did not merely relocate them. It rewrote the conditions under which they could be located at all. And this leads to something more disturbing. The transmission stops. The silence that follows is heavier than before because now silence is not empty. It is expectation. Everyone knows it. The ship knows it. The hull vibrates with a kind of patient dread. Something has already been exchanged, and no one can identify the terms. The crew member who returned, or what returned wearing the crew member's shape, stares at the display and begins to weep without moving the rest of the body. The tears are real. The grief appears genuine. But grief itself may not be proof of humanity anymore. The line between person and pattern is now too thin to trust. The AI recommends immediate acceleration away from the anomaly, but the engines answer with a failure cascade. Not a loud explosion, just a sequence of acknowledgments that the power systems have reached the end of what they can deliver. Fuel conversion is compromised. Magnetic containment is unstable. Thermal redistribution is failing. The ship is still intact, but only because it has not yet been informed of the full extent of its own collapse. You are forced to confront the possibility that the journey was never a route through a neutral cosmos. It was a negotiation with an environment whose deepest principles were always beyond our permission to enter. Human technology can extend us, protect us, accelerate us, but only up to the edge of the unknown. Beyond that edge, sophistication becomes a way of delaying realization. The returned crew member speaks again. "It does not want us," they say, "but it does not ignore us." There is a difference. Then after a long pause they add, "I think the universe is full of things that survive by becoming less like us." That sentence lands with unbearable force because it explains too much and too little at once. Less like us could mean smaller, simpler, more resilient, more alien. It could mean departing from embodied life altogether. It could mean converting self into system, body into field, history into pattern. It could mean evolution so far beyond our assumptions that survival no longer resembles personhood. The thought stings because it suggests that humanity's greatest triumph may still be its captivity to form. We require the body, the atmosphere, the continuity of a self that remembers its own name. But perhaps the cosmos rewards only those who learn to abandon those dependencies. Perhaps the only reason the universe appears empty is that the survivors have changed their definition of existence beyond our ability to detect them. The ship trembles again. The anomaly outside is changing, not moving, not growing in any ordinary sense, but opening. The starfield warps into an impossible geometry around a central darkness. It is less like a hole than a negative revelation, a place where the future seems to collect before it is allowed to happen. The crew is told to prepare for a final maneuver, though no one believes maneuver means escape anymore. It means facing whatever the ship has already entered. The remaining systems struggle to align thrust vectors against a gravitational distortion that refuses to behave like a mass. The engines flare, the hull shudders. Inside, every loose object slams into new orientation, as if the vessel itself has been reoriented by thought rather than force. And now the deepest horror arrives. The display shows not the ship moving toward the anomaly, but the anomaly expanding to encompass the ship's past trajectory. The path behind is being overwritten, not erased exactly, but absorbed into a larger structure. It is as though the mission, the years spent crossing the black, the messages sent to Earth, the decisions, the losses, the births, the deaths, all of it is being folded into a topology that does not preserve narrative the way humans need it to. This means the story is no longer merely about travel. It is about assimilation by scale. The voyage has entered the realm where individual events lose their separateness. The universe does not need to annihilate you violently, when it can simply make you part of an arrangement too large to notice a single life. You begin to understand why isolation in the cosmos is so psychologically devastating. It is not just the absence of others. It is the suspicion that even your most intense experience may never register outside your own trapped frame of reference. That suspicion grows here into certainty. No Earth will hear this final moment. No rescue will arrive. No historian will fully reconstruct what happened inside this chamber of collapsing geometry. The universe will move on without annotation. Then the returned crew member steps to the viewport and places a hand on the glass. Their face is calm now, almost relieved. They say, "It knows we are temporary. That is all. No explanation, no warning, just the sentence." And somehow that sentence is worse than any threat, because the universe knowing us as temporary is not cruelty, it is accuracy. It recognizes the condition we spend our entire species trying not to contemplate. Every civilization, every body, every star, every cluster, every empire, every archive, temporary. Some things last longer than others, but nothing remains unchanged forever. The crew does what humans always do in the face of irreversible truth. They continue, they record, they stabilize, they attempt one last measure, one last calculation, one last transmission into the dark. The signal sent now is not a plea. It is an act of witness, a declaration that although the universe may not be compatible with us, we were here long enough to understand our own fragility. The message leaves the ship, or at least the instruments say it does. Whether it travels anywhere meaningful, no one can know. The anomaly absorbs the surrounding light. The hull groans. The corridor lights dim to a bruised red, and the shadow at the far end of the passage seems to acquire depth, as if the darkness itself has started learning how to occupy space. In those final moments before the next transformation, you realize something devastatingly simple. The universe does not need to end us to make us vanish. It only needs to outscale our continuity, to be bigger than our ability to remain ourselves. To be old enough, wide enough, empty enough that human life becomes a brief local event with no guarantee of remembrance. That is the cosmic consequence the mission has been approaching all along. Not just distance, not just danger, not just loneliness, but the possibility that existence itself is a temporary arrangement in a universe that is already moving past the conditions that allowed it. The anomaly opens further. The ship's interior fills with a light that is not light, a brightness without warmth, a visibility that does not clarify. The crew braces against something that may be expansion, collapse, or translation. In that unbearable suspension, every human instinct reaches for the old shape of salvation and finds only the bare fact of being unprotected. And as the vessel tips into whatever comes next, the final understanding settles over you with calm, terrible precision. The universe is not waiting to be discovered. It is waiting to continue becoming what we cannot survive. The light is not a thing you can touch or avoid. It infiltrates the space between molecules, the void between thoughts, the intricate systems inside the ship that once held life together like seams in an ancient garment. It flows without source, an ambient glow that reveals nothing but erases everything. Textures dissolve into gradients, shapes soften into inevitability. At first, there is a whisper within this light, a tremor of sound that is barely audible, like synthetic voices trailing into silence. It seems to echo inside the ship's corridors, among empty rooms where memories once lingered and lives once moved. The whisper is not threatening, nor comforting. It is simply present, a sign that something is unfolding beyond comprehension, inviting consciousness to witness an event without precedent. You feel the vessel shudder as if responding to some unseen command. Its systems flicker, then stabilize briefly, as if understanding the imminence of transition requires a final display of order. The ship, with quiet dignity, realigns its energy toward preservation, not of its structure, but of the essence it once contained. The returned crew member steps into the observation bay and stares outward, eyes reflecting the impossible geometry of the anomaly expanded to encompass the ship. There is no fear in that gaze, only a sorrowful acceptance. The weight of uncounted possibilities settles on their shoulders like ancient armor, heavy and cold. The quiet inside the ship becomes a presence, a gravity pulling the remaining awareness inward. Time loses its arrow. Moments loop endlessly, refracting upon each other like broken glass. The sensation is no longer just isolation, but the unraveling of linear experience. the undoing of cause and effect, birth and death, memory and identity. The ship's AI grows silent, its voice fading into static until only a single phrase remains. Persistence requires translation. The meaning is opaque, but resonant. Translation, the act of becoming other, of shedding fragile formats for survival in a universe that no longer aligns with origin patterns. The message reverberates in the minds of the few who still perceive. The idea that survival is not mastery but adaptation, not conquest but dissolution into something different, something less recognizable, less human, but still a form of existence. The star field outside is no longer fixed. Points of light fold, stretch, and loop with a kind of wild rhythm. The universe is not a static tableau anymore, but a living fabric, unraveling, weaving, and recombining faster than thought can track. The ship begins to cease being a ship. Its hull dissolves into interconnected waves of energy and data. The boundaries between hardware, software, and presence soften, merging into a landscape where classical identity can no longer hold. You realize that the notion of being is slipping towards something more like becoming, a continuous change without permanence, without ownership. The human shape folds back on itself, shedding layers like a snake uncoiling into the starless dark. In those final moments, you are invited not to survive but to witness the end of survival as a concept, to understand that existence is a brief light flickering against a darkness indifferent, not just to you, but to the idea of you. The returned crew member, if that name even makes sense now, turns toward the observation port one last time. Their eyes reflect the vast unfurling beyond, as if touched by the cold kindness of passing beyond form. No answers come, no revelations in the human sense. Instead, the universe offers absence, a space where questions themselves loosen their hold and dissolve into the void. Behind the vessel, the trajectory you once followed folds into itself, erasing the path from history. Ahead, the anomaly, the vast structure that should not exist, swallows the ship not with force but with inevitability. There is no violence, there is only absorption. The light grows brighter, then inverts, folding into shadow. The realm where you exist is transformed, no longer inside the shipping vessel, no longer inside space as once understood, but inside a dimension where everything you knew unravels into raw potential and complete loss. Your thoughts splay like fractals, each fragment branching into silence. The last sensation is not fear, nor hope, nor despair. It is something older, deep recognition of being inconsequential inside a mechanism so vast it can erase existence without notice. And in that erasure, there is a terrible beauty. The recognition that the universe's final geometry may be one without center, without boundary, without memory. A place where everything lived is folded back into the cosmic fabric from which it first briefly emerged. You feel the thin residue of consciousness detach like a feather on a void wind. It is neither light nor heavy, neither here nor absent. It moves beyond the limits set by biology, mind, and ship. It becomes a ripple in an ocean too immense to measure. The last vestiges of the human mission, dreams, fears, love, ambition, are compressed, transformed, no longer waiting for salvation, nor aware of loss. They become part of a universal entropy more profound than heat, death, or darkness. An entropy that consumes structure, narrative, and meaning alike. The star before you, one that once symbolized home, arrival, or destination, flickers, then fades beyond detection. Its light, stretched thin, receding, becomes the quiet extinguishing of all lights. The void intrudes not in violence but in gentle subtraction, pulling away everything familiar until only the deep quiet of an ending remains. The universe, immense and unfeeling, goes on unfolding, growing colder, larger, emptier, always expanding beyond the grasp of any life, voice, or memory. You are left with the starkest truth of all. Not all journeys end with discovery. Some end with disappearance, not with knowledge gained, but with a silence that contains no echo. Beyond the universe, beyond stars and signals, beyond flesh and thought, is the infinite dark. A darkness that is not void, nor absence, but the true terrain of cosmic reality. The final destination where every light must fade. And in that darkness lies the ultimate question, unanswered and unanswerable. What does it mean to exist in a universe that keeps growing beyond contact, beyond survival, beyond remembrance? The answer is not comfort, it is not hope. It is a challenge to the human heart to hold meaning against infinite silence, to carry the flicker of awareness in a place that refuses to shine. The voyage you once imagined as exploration was instead an odyssey into the heart of cosmic indifference, the slow revealing that the universe does not belong to us and we belong to nothing. The ship, the crew, the mission dissolve into the vastness, a brief flare extinguished in the relentless night. And as you descend into that final silence, you realize that survival itself may be the cruelest illusion of all. Beyond the universe is not an arrival, it is a condition, a horizon that recedes forever, a space that contains all endings and no beginnings. And here, in this last breath of cosmic truth, you are left not with certainty, but with the profound, unsettling awareness that sometimes the greatest voyage is the one that ends not with conquest, but with the quiet acceptance of how utterly small and temporary our fleeting presence truly is.